Shabbat Shalom. This week there was a double parsha, Behar and Bechukotai, and the second of those parshiot is what I want to speak about today, and many of you may have familiarity with these portions. The first part of Bechukotai talks about a series of blessings that would befall our people, which is followed by the second part, which is a series of curses. And it's those curses that I want to talk about today, because in many ways, every time we get to this Torah portion, it leaves me with a feeling of cringiness. And I think that's because what the Torah basically says, that if our people stop adhering to mitzvot, and I want to think of that expansively, if we lose our way as Jewish people or as humans, the Torah threatens or maybe promises that bad things will be inevitable. And what the Torah portion says is that those bad things will happen in tiers. So we'll experience bad things, curses, if we lose our way, if we don't follow the mitzvot, if we lose our moral code. And then, if we keep behaving badly and we don't change our ways, the Torah promises things will get worse. And then the Torah threatens again in God's name that things will grow even worse yet, sevenfold, to the point that people will eat and never be satiated, that people will plant crops that will never grow, and that people will bake bread that will never rise. And it even goes so far as to say that parents will end up eating their children. Yes, it's horrifying, it's dreadful, and it is beyond cringy. But throughout the week, I've been thinking about these threats or these promises and wondering about how they're relevant in our world. And then came the news out of Washington, D.C. on Wednesday that a gunman had opened fire and murdered 2 young people because he thought that they were Jews and because they were gathered in a Jewish place for an event that was hosted by a Jewish organization. And after days of thinking about this tragedy, I finally realized that maybe what God, through the Torah, was trying to tell us was that we as human beings need instructions. We need instructions about how to be good and about how to do good. And without such rules, or without following those rules, what we traditionally refer to as mitzvot, or in non-Jewish language, a moral code, bad things really do happen. And no, we are not yet eating children, but what happened to 2 young people who were just showing up to gather with friends in a museum in our country's capital, it was horrifying and it was tragic, and it never should have happened. Those people that were murdered on Wednesday night were Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lachinsky. Many of you undoubtedly have been following their stories. Sarah was Jewish. She was raised in Kansas, and she began working at the embassy 1 month after the October 7th massacre. She earned a master's degree in international studies from American University, and she earned a second master's degree in natural resources and sustainable development from none other than the United Nations University for Peace. According to reports, Sarah was an idealist. She volunteered with an organization called Tech to Peace, and what she was trying to work on was how to support entrepreneurship between young Palestinians and young Israelis. She was someone who had a strong moral code herself, even when she was young. I read that she was actually interviewed on a local Kansas TV station as a senior in high school when swastikas were put on the walls of her high school. In her interview, she shared, and I quote her, "I worry about going to my synagogue, and now I have to worry about safety at my school, and that shouldn't be a thing." Yaron was born in Israel, and he spent time during his childhood years in Germany. His father was Jewish, his mother was Christian. He was an open-minded guy who blended civilizations. He spoke German, Hebrew, and Japanese. He was described to be kind and generous as a friend, and a devout Christian and a defender of Israel. That night, on Wednesday night, Sarah and Yaron were at the event at the embassy to focus on delivering humanitarian relief across the region, which included to the Palestinians in Gaza. But as Barry Weiss would comment in her article in the Free Press, and I quote, "That was of no concern to the alleged murderer. He was there to free Palestine," the slogan that he shouted after he executed them. And according to several witnesses after the shooting, he reached into a bag, he pulled out a keffiyeh, and he said, "I did this for Gaza." In an article that was published in the Free Press, Barry Weiss wrote, "How could it be that killing 2 Israeli embassy staffers would improve the situation in Gaza?" She noted that the shooter's evil worldview had a demented logic, and, as he proved, it's a risk to us all. The worldview is a worldview that says that Jews and those who support the Jewish state wherever they live are now acceptable targets. And then she spoke of a deep dive that she took when she was looking for news about the couple on the web. She says she found a video from October 12th, only 5 days after the massacre in Israel. And she shared that in the video were a dozen masked people wearing Palestinian flags in front of that museum. And she reflected, it's strange to watch now. A few people wearing masks and shouting slogans, others beating drums, and some holding up signs. But over the weeks and the months that would follow, those flags would turn into chants to globalize the Intifada, and professional talkers dismissed it as a metaphor rather than what it was, a demand for open season on the Jewish people throughout the world. Over a year ago, Einat Wilf, a foreign affairs expert, PhD, and diplomat, came here to Beth El, and she issued that same comment. She said, "To Westerners, we must stop whitewashing the words that are being said." She said, "Take people at their word. Trust that they are not stupid. Trust that they mean what they are saying." But back to Barry's piece. The more elite institutions, the more people who populate them, glorifying evil. Remember these moments. Do you remember at George Washington University when students projected "Glory to our martyrs" and "Free Palestine from the river to the sea" on their campus buildings? Do you remember at Cooper Union in Manhattan when Jewish students had to hide in the library from a mob of fellow students that were knocking or banging on the door? Do you remember at Harvard when more than 30 student groups signed that petition blaming Jewish victims for their own deaths, saying that they, and I quote, "hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence"? We all watched in horror as the posters of those being held hostage were torn down by people on campuses and throughout the cities in the world, smiling as they did so. And simultaneously, we all listened or watched as online influencers who understood and knew nothing about the complexities of Israel or Gaza or the entire region condemned Zionists as racists. Barry Weiss, she calls it out, and she says this: "Venomous, untrue statements about Israel, its supporters in the war against Hamas and Gaza are chipping away at the old taboo against open anti-Semitism in America. The demonization of American Jews and Zionists is exactly how a democratic state and its supporters have been made into targets. It is how the permission structure for violence against Jews in America has been erected. Ultimately, what we all know is this. What began as protests turned to violent activity and now have turned to murder after murder after murder of Jews across the world. The shooter in Washington shouted, "Free Palestine," but he murdered Sarah and Yaron because he thought that they were Jews. Many of us grew up hearing those stories. Stories about the Holocaust. Some here today have relatives that lived through the Shoah, others know survivors, and still others know those who did not survive. But who among us would ever have imagined that in 2025, anti-Semitism would become acceptable? We speak of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, but the truth is that mosques don't typically need armed security guards. And synagogues, we sure do. Rabbi Schwartz and I just yesterday were discussing the issues of security here. After all, Sarah and Yaron were outside of the museum. Can a police force and security ever fully protect us? Barry Weiss said, and I quote, that no police force, not even the best in the world, can hold back a culture that has embraced violence as a means of expression. Sarah and Yaron died this week as martyrs. They went to work at the Israeli embassy. Sarah told a mutual friend of ours that she lost all of her friends when she began her work there. But she went to work there anyway. And she and Yaron believed in Israel. They believed that when good people work together, we can change the world for the better. And they lived their oh too short lives of 26 and 30 years, showing up for others, standing up to hate, and working to build bridges and to create that better world. And so today we mourn for their senseless, hateful ends. And we also recognize that Bechukotai is most certainly right. We need the mitzvot to teach us between right and wrong. We need the mitzvot to tell us how to behave in relationship to our families, our friends, our neighbors, toward the strangers, and even, maybe especially, towards our enemies. Because when people or a country lose our moral compass, we see what that looks like all around us, and we know that nothing good can grow from that. My daughter last month attended a class that was taught by Tal Becker, an expert in conflict resolution and a Middle East negotiator. He sat in front of the class and he told a class that was full of almost college kids from America spending a gap year in Israel that right now, what we need from American Jews is we need American Jews to dream. He said, in Israel, they are trying to endure. They are trying to survive. And they don't have space or bandwidth to dream. But in America, we still have that luxury. Sarah and Yaron were dreamers. And in their memories, we must never give in to despair, even these days. Because it's our turn to keep dreaming and to keep their dreams of a better Middle East and a better world alive. Shabbat Shalom.